I was on a long solo road trip, just trying to make good time across the country. It wasn't my first time making a trip like this. I preferred driving over flying, and I always took the cheapest motels I could find just to crash for the night. Nothing fancy, just a bed, a shower, and back on the road by morning. This motel was one of those places that looked fine in pictures but had a weird, rundown vibe in person. The sign was half-lit, flickering on one side, and the parking lot was almost empty. The guy at the front desk barely looked up when I walked in. He just slid the key across the counter without much of a greeting. I figured it was late, and he was just tired. I didn't think much of it. The room itself was okay. Old, smelled a little stale, but the sheets were clean and the bathroom looked decent enough. I've stayed in worse places. I dropped my bag on the bed and went to plug in my phone when I noticed the vent above the bed. It was weirdly big, much larger than a normal air vent, and positioned directly above the pillows. I didn't think much of it at first, but something about it made me uneasy. Maybe it was how the slats were angled downward, almost like they were positioned to have a clear view of the bed. Just to ease my nerves, I grabbed my phone and shined the flashlight into it. That's when I saw it. A small glint, a reflection, like a lens. I froze. My stomach dropped. I angled the light around to be sure, and yeah, there was something back there. Something small, round, and glossy, catching the light just enough to confirm what I was dreading. Camera. I swallowed hard, trying to think. Maybe it was just my imagination, a trick of the light, but the longer I looked, the clearer it became. There was no doubt. Someone had a camera hidden inside that vent, aimed directly at the bed. A rush of adrenaline hit me. I grabbed the chair from the corner and stood on it to get a better look. My hands were shaking as I reached up and pulled at the vent cover. Came off easily, too easily, like it had been removed and replaced multiple times. Behind it, there wasn't just one camera. There were several, all wired through the ventilation system, pointing in different directions. That's when I really started to panic. I jumped off the chair and grabbed my phone, dialing the front desk. The phone rang twice before the same guy who checked me in answered. Yeah. His tone was completely disinterested. I hesitated for a second, then forced myself to speak. Hey, I just checked into room 208. There's a camera in my vent. Multiple cameras, actually. What the hell is going on? There was silence on the other end. Then, too calmly, he said, Sir, please don't touch anything. I'll send someone right up. That's when I knew something was really, really wrong. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He didn't even ask questions. Just, don't touch anything. Like I had just stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to see. I wasn't waiting around to find out what that meant. I grabbed my bag, shoved my stuff inside, and bolted. As I stepped out into the parking lot, I noticed a dark SUV parked near the entrance. Tinted windows, engine running. Someone was inside, just sitting there, facing my room. I didn't look twice. I just got in my car and floored it out of there. My heart was hammering in my chest. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting that SUV to follow me, but it never did. Still, I didn't stop driving for at least an hour. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated but answered anyway, my voice unsteady. Hello. For a second, there was silence. Then, a low, quiet voice said, You shouldn't have looked. My entire body went cold. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. I kept driving until exhaustion forced me to pull into a rest stop, where I parked in a well-lit area and locked my doors. The next morning, I drove straight to the nearest police station and told them everything. The cameras, the guy at the front desk, the SUV, the phone call. They took me seriously at first. 2 officers drove to the motel to check it out, and I waited at the station, running through everything in my head, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing it. Then they came back, and they told me there was nothing there. No cameras, no wiring, nothing in the vents. And the guy at the front desk? He claimed I had never checked in, that no one had stayed in that room the night before. There was no record of my reservation. I pulled up my credit card statement to show them the charge, but it was gone. Like the transaction had never happened. I was on a solo road trip, something I'd always wanted to do. Just me, my car, and the open road. No real plan, just stopping wherever I felt like it. That night, I picked a small roadside motel just outside of a quiet town. Nothing fancy, just a place to crash for the night before continuing my drive in the morning. The motel was one of those single-story buildings where every room had its own entrance from the outside. There was a buzzing neon vacancy sign out front, and the parking lot was mostly empty. I parked right in front of my door, checked in at the front desk, and made my way to my room. It was basic: bed, TV, a little bathroom, but it was clean enough. I locked the door behind me, set my bag down, and went through my usual routine, checking under the bed, in the closet, even behind the shower curtain. It's just a habit I've had ever since I was a kid. Nothing seemed off, so I changed into my pajamas and settled in for the night. Around 9 p.m., just as I was scrolling through my phone, there was a knock on my door. It wasn't aggressive, just a couple of light taps. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Then, a voice followed. "Housekeeping. Just checking if you need towels." That immediately felt off. Housekeeping at 9 p.m.? That made no sense. I hadn't asked for anything, and even if I had, housekeeping usually wasn't a thing in motels like this at night. I got up quietly and walked to the door, careful not to make any noise. The room had a peephole, so I pressed my eye against it. A man stood outside. He wasn't in a uniform, not even a name tag, just a plain t-shirt and jeans. He looked normal, late 30s, maybe early 40s. But something about him made my skin crawl. He wasn't holding towels or a cleaning cart. Nothing that suggested he actually worked there. Instead of opening the door, I decided to mess with him. "What's the password?" I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a long pause. Then, in a flat voice, he said, "Ma'am, just open up." My stomach dropped. That was not the response of someone who actually worked there. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone, dialing the front desk. "Hi, this is room 112, I whispered. "Did you send housekeeping to my room?" There was a pause on the other end. Then the receptionist's voice came through. "No, we don't do housekeeping this late." My heart was pounding now. "There's a man outside my room saying he's housekeeping." Another pause. Then, more urgently, "Do not open your door. Lock everything. I'm calling the police." I felt sick. My hands shook as I double-checked the deadbolt and the chain lock. Just as I turned back toward the bed, I heard it. The doorknob jiggled. Not just once. It rattled, like someone was trying to force it open. I covered my mouth with my hand, backing up toward the bathroom. My mind was racing. Could he pick the lock? Break in? Then the jiggling stopped. Silence. I didn't move. I just stood there, phone gripped tightly in my hand, waiting, listening. Then soft footsteps, moving away. I exhaled shakily, pressing my ear against the door. Nothing. I peeked through the peephole again. The hallway was empty. A few minutes later, I heard sirens. When the police knocked, I made them show their badges through the window before I even cracked the door open. They checked the area but found nothing. The front desk confirmed that no one had requested towels, and when they checked the security cameras, they didn't see anyone outside my room. That's what freaked me out the most. They saw me, standing by the door, looking through the peephole. But there was no man. No one had been recorded approaching or leaving my room. The officers searched the premises and didn't find anything. No forced locks, no sign of an intruder. The motel staff told me something even worse. There had been no check-ins besides mine that night. Meaning, whoever that man was, he had already been inside the motel somewhere. Hiding. Waiting. I packed my bags and left immediately, driving straight through the night until I hit a bigger town. This happened about 2 years ago, and it still keeps me up at night sometimes. I don't know what's worse, what we found, or the fact that someone knew and still let us stay in that room. My girlfriend, Emily, and I were on a road trip, just driving across a few states for fun. We weren't in a rush, just stopping wherever we felt like it, taking in the scenery, eating at little hole-in-the-wall diners. It was nice, until that night. We had been driving all day, and by the time it got dark, we were both exhausted. We weren't anywhere near a big town, just a stretch of highway with nothing but trees and occasional gas stations. We saw one of those old-school neon motel signs up ahead, Valley View Inn. It looked run down, but honestly, at that point, we didn't care. We just needed a place to crash for the night. We pulled into the lot, and there was only one other car parked out front. The office was tiny, with flickering fluorescent lights, and the guy behind the counter barely looked up when we walked in. He just slid the guest book toward us without saying a word. Emily nudged me and whispered, "This place is creepy." I agreed, but we were too tired to be picky. We got the key, room 6, and dragged our bags to the door. As soon as I opened it, the smell hit me. A strong chemical smell, like someone had gone way overboard with bleach. The kind that burns your nose and makes your eyes water. The room itself was weirdly clean, like too clean. The sheets were tucked in so tightly it looked military grade. The counters and tables were spotless, and there wasn't a single speck of dust. Emily wrinkled her nose. "Geez, did they just scrub this place down?" I laughed. "At least we know it's clean." We were too tired to care, so we just dropped our bags, kicked off our shoes, and collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was stiff, and there was a faint musty smell underneath all the bleach, but we were out in minutes. Then, around 3 a.m., Emily shook me awake. "Babe, wake up." I groaned. "What?" "Something's wrong." I sat up groggily. "What are you talking about?" She was staring at the floor. "There's something under the bed." I rubbed my eyes and looked where she was pointing. There was a dark stain seeping out from under the mattress. At first, I thought maybe she spilled something, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was red. My stomach dropped. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and reached down to touch it. It was wet. Dicky. "Jesus," I whispered. "Is that?" Emily was already up, backing toward the door. "We need to get out of here." I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. That's when we decided to check. I don't know why. Maybe we just needed to confirm what we were already dreading. I lifted the edge of the mattress while Emily clutched my arm. The smell hit us first, thick, metallic, unmistakable. And then we saw it. A body, stuffed inside the bed frame, cramped in the hollow space beneath the mattress. It was a man, face down, clothes soaked through with blood. His skin was pale, almost gray. Emily let out this choked scream, and I dropped the mattress back down like it burned me. We stumbled away, grabbing our stuff, fumbling for the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the lock. As soon as we got outside, we ran to the car and called the police. The dispatcher kept asking us to repeat ourselves because I was talking too fast, panicking. I told them there was a body under our bed. A dead body. They told us to stay put, that officers were on their way. We waited in the car, staring at the door to room 6 like something might come out of it. The whole place was dead silent, and for the first time I realized the guy at the front desk never asked how long we were staying. Never asked for ID. The police got there within 10 minutes. For cars pulled up, lights flashing, and a couple of officers went straight for the room. One of them started questioning us while the others checked inside. Then we heard one of them swear loudly. A few seconds later, another officer ran out and threw up in the bushes. They confirmed it. A man had been murdered and stuffed under the bed. And here's the worst part. The room had already been cleaned before we got there. Someone had stripped the bed, scrubbed the floors, bleached the surfaces, and then let us check in, knowing full well there was a body still inside that frame. The police questioned the motel staff, but the guy at the front desk claimed he didn't know anything, said he was just filling in for someone else. But the way he kept shifting, the way his hands shook slightly when they asked him questions, something was off. The whole motel was shut down that night. The cops went through all the rooms, and the crime scene team spent hours and hours. They let us leave after getting our statements, but I don't think either of us spoke for the first half of the drive. I travel a lot for work, so I've gotten used to last-minute bookings, weird motels, and less than ideal sleeping conditions. But this one messed me up. I was on a business trip in a small town, one of those places you drive through and don't even think twice about. My meeting had run late, and I was too exhausted to make the drive to the nearest city, so I found a cheap motel off the highway. It had decent reviews, nothing fancy, just a place to crash for the night. The guy at the front desk barely looked up as he slid me the key. Room 104. I remember that number very clearly now. The room itself was exactly what you'd expect for $60 a night. Faded carpet, outdated furniture, and a slightly musty smell that I tried to ignore. But whatever, I just needed sleep. After setting my bag down, I went into the bathroom to freshen up. That's when I noticed it. The mirror above the sink was slightly tilted. It wasn't a huge deal, but it bugged me. Instinctively, I reached out to adjust it, and it moved way too easily, like it wasn't properly attached to the wall. That was weird. Curious. I pressed against the edges, and to my surprise, the entire mirror popped off the wall with barely any effort. Behind it was a small, dark opening. My stomach dropped. I don't know what I expected to see. A maintenance panel? Storage? But no, it was a doorway. A hidden fucking doorway. My first instinct was to put the mirror back and pretend I never saw it. But my brain wouldn't let it go. What the hell was behind there? I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and hesitated for a few seconds before pushing the mirror aside completely. The passage behind it was narrow, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The walls were rough, unfinished wood, and the floor was dusty, covered in footprints that weren't mine. The smell hit me. A mix of sweat, old food, and something else I couldn't place. I stepped closer, my phone light sweeping over the cramped space. That's when I saw it. An old, stained mattress, empty food containers, a pile of crumpled clothes, a rope. Someone had been living there. A sickening wave of realization washed over me. This wasn't some old storage area, this was a hideout. Someone had been watching people through the mirror. Maybe even me. I took a step back, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. That's when I heard it. A floorboard creaked. Inside the passage. I froze. The sound wasn't distant. It wasn't an old building settling. It was close. Someone was in there. Panic surged through me. I turned and bolted out of the bathroom, grabbing my bag without even thinking. As I fumbled with the door lock, I heard something else. A shuffling sound, coming from the bathroom. I yanked the door open and ran. The front desk guy barely reacted when I burst into the lobby, breathless and shaking. I told him someone was in my room, behind the mirror. For the first time, he actually looked up, his expression shifting from bored to alarmed. He grabbed the phone and called the police without hesitation. When the cops arrived, they searched the room. It didn't take long. They pulled the mirror off completely, shining their flashlights into the passage. And then they found him, a man, pale, gaunt, and filthy, curled up in the back of the hidden space. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. The police pulled him out, and that's when he admitted it. He had been living there for months, watching guests through the mirror, slipping into their rooms while they slept. I was about 6 hours into a 12-hour drive when exhaustion finally got the best of me. I had planned to push through, but the road was turning blurry, and I knew I was at that dangerous point where my reaction time was shot. I checked my phone and saw a cheap motel a couple of miles ahead. Small, family-owned, nothing fancy, but good enough for a night's rest. Pulling into the lot, I noticed it was practically deserted, except for one other car near the entrance. A little bell jingled as I walked into the lobby, and an older man behind the desk looked up from a newspaper. He gave me a polite but tired smile, like he was used to late-night guests who barely exchanged pleasantries before collapsing in bed. "Just for the night?" he asked, flipping open a logbook. "Yeah, just passing through." He nodded and handed me a key attached to one of those plastic fobs with the room number engraved. Room 304. Up the stairs, all the way at the end of the hall. I mumbled a thanks, grabbed my overnight bag, and headed up. The place smelled like old carpet and air freshener, but the room itself was standard: bed, TV, a tiny desk, and a bathroom with weak water pressure. But something was off. There was this strong chemical smell. Not cleaning products, not air freshener. It was almost metallic, but with a sharpness that made my nose sting a little. I figured it was just some industrial strength cleaner they used, maybe to cover up cigarette smoke or something worse. Either way, I was too tired to care. I double-checked the lock, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the bed. I woke up to pounding on the door. Not a polite knock. Full-on fists slamming against the wood. I sat up, my heart hammering. I checked my phone. 2:13 a.m. The knocking came again, harder this time, and then a voice. "This is my room. Get out." A man. His voice was hoarse and ragged, like he had been screaming for hours. My stomach dropped. I wasn't about to open the door, but maybe the front desk had screwed up and double-booked me. One SEC. I called out, grabbing my phone. I dialed the front desk. It rang twice before the old man picked up, his voice thick with sleep. "Front desk," he mumbled. "Hey, there's someone banging on my door saying this is his room." A pause. "Which room are you in?" 304. Another pause. Longer this time. "Ma'am, we don't have a room 304. I frowned, glancing at the key still on the nightstand. The plastic tag clearly said 304. What? I think there's been a mistake. But then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. There was no room number on the door. I could see the metal outline where a plaque should have been, but it was gone. The room next to mine, 303, had its number plate just fine. But after that, the next room was 305. Number 304. I felt a rush of cold panic. "Sir, I'm in the room right now. I have the key." The banging came again, this time even harder. "Get out. Get out now." I bolted. I grabbed my bag and yanked the door open, half expecting to come face to face with some angry guest. But the hallway was empty. No one was there. The whole motel was silent. The only sound was my own heavy breathing. I ran downstairs, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The old man at the desk looked up as I rushed in, his face suddenly drained of color. "What room did you say you were in?" 304. I gasped. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but someone was banging on my door and yelling." His hands trembled slightly as he closed the logbook. "That room was sealed off years ago." My mouth went dry. "What?" He swallowed hard, then walked around the counter, motioning for me to follow him. We went back up the stairs. He stopped at the spot where my room should have been. I watched as he placed his palm against the wall and gave it a firm push. The wall moved, just a little, just enough for me to see that the drywall had been hastily patched over. The edges were rough, uneven, like someone had done a quick, messy job of sealing it up. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I was just in there." He didn't answer. He just turned and hurried back downstairs. I followed, my skin crawling. By the time we reached the front desk, he had already picked up the phone. "Who are you calling?" "The police." Took them about 15 minutes to arrive. 2 officers walked in, their hands resting on their belts. The old man just pointed upstairs without saying a word. They went up with flashlights, tapping along the wall where my room had been. After a few minutes, one of them called in for backup. An hour later, a whole team showed up, and they started tearing into the wall. What they found made me sick. There were scratch marks inside, deep, desperate gouges in the wood beneath the drywall, and embedded in the grooves, fingernails, some old, some fresh. The police never told me much after that. They just asked a lot of questions: who gave me the key, what exactly I heard, if I had seen anything unusual. I left before they finished. I didn't care about the refund. I didn't even care about my bag, which I'd left behind in the room. I just wanted to get away from that place.